All right, everyone, let's get started. It is 2 o'clock, and we're here to talk about some of the snakes that we have here in Nevada. So first, just a quick little disclaimer. This is a PG-rated event from the Department of Wildlife, so just keep that in mind. Make sure that we have all the appropriate behavior and language suited for a PG audience. That would be awesome. Got a click. There we go. So today we are going to talk about the venomous snakes of Nevada. So my name is Jessica Wolf, and I am the Urban Wildlife Coordinator for the Western region for the Department of Wildlife. And then with me today, I have one of my fearless leaders, Julie Watson. She is going to be taking care of the chat and our question and answer box. So we actually don't have a chat for this one, but if you have any questions or answers, if you just kind of lightly scroll on the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see a question and answer box, and you can type in any questions or comments that you have into that box, and Julie will get you an answer. If there are lots of questions or some of the same questions, we can go over them at the end once the whole presentation is done. So you can obviously see my face. Hi, everyone. But this is me and our snake, Benny. He is a gopher snake, and should this have been a live presentation, he would have been joining us. And this is Miss Julie. So as you can see, we both really like snakes. So that's part of the reason why we wanted to do this program. So let's just get right into it. Rattlesnakes have some things in common with the whole family. So they are all pit vipers, and the pit is the area in between the eye and the nostril. And this is a thermal sensing organ. So it's basically their thermal vision to help them find their food sources. This is pretty unique to our rattlesnakes. Things like gopher snakes do not have that pit organ. They are in the viper family, just like water moccasins and copperheads. And they all are known for having those hollow fangs, which basically act like a needle. When those fangs aren't in use, they have them folded to the top of their mouth so that they're not stabbing themselves. And they have a set of 7 replacement fangs and lesser sets of development behind those front ones that come out. That's because they are super, super brittle. So they can break off just like a fingernail would or whatever pretty easily. And then when one breaks off, it'll drop it, and then another fang will come forward so that they can still eat. They also are known for having venom glands, right? That's how they get their food. And those venom glands are connected to the fang, and they're what helps to give a rattlesnake their triangular shaped head. They have to have some place to keep those venom glands, and so it just kind of bumps out their head a little bit so it looks like a little triangle. Rattlesnakes have vertical pupils, and they don't have super great eyesight. It's okay, but it's not the best. They can't see really defined images. And they don't have an ear structure. Instead, they sense vibrations in the world around them. They also have some sort of smell-o-vision. They use their Jacobson organs, and it's basically a chemoreceptor to help them gain information from the world around them and to kind of sense what's going on through smell. Rattlesnakes are known for their rattle, right? And it's made out of keratin, which is the same stuff that makes up our hair and our fingernails. So it's pretty brittle, and they break off quite easily. A new button is added every single time it sheds, so you really can't determine the age of a rattlesnake based off of how many buttons that it has, because they can shed a couple times a year. Younger rattlesnakes, baby rattlesnakes, they're born with 1 button, and the buttons rubbing together is actually what gives the rattle the sound that it makes. So a baby rattlesnake won't be able to make a sound when it shakes its tail. It has to go through at least 1 shed in order to get 2 buttons so that they can rub up against each other and make that sound. Rattlesnakes are cold-blooded, and their ideal temperature range is anywhere from 70 to 80 degrees. That's when they're super happy. Rattlesnakes mate in the spring, and then they'll have their young in the late summer. And they're really unique in the fact that they are ovoviviparous, which is a very fancy scientific word that took me forever to learn how to say. Basically meaning that they carry the eggs inside of the female, but they actually kind of give birth to fully functioning baby rattlesnakes. And they can have anywhere from 4 to 20 young. But their survival rate is super low. Only about 20% of them make it to the second year, whether that be from humans seeing a rattlesnake and killing them, or predators in the area. Plenty of things will eat a rattlesnake. So they really do have a pretty low survival rate. And one common misconception is that the young rattlesnakes are more venomous than the adults. This is not the case. They aren't more venomous, but they definitely are more protective. So if you try and pick up a baby rattlesnake, that's a very scary situation for that animal. And they're kind of going to give it all they can give, meaning all the venom they can, in order to try and escape from that situation. Adults, on the other hand, have better venom control, and they're not just letting it all loose. Rattlesnakes are ambush predators, so they are going to kind of sit and hang out and wait for an animal to get close enough to them for them to strike at and kill. Their prey includes rodents, so mice, rats, voles, small little birds, small mammals, anything that's really kind of coming close to them and is big enough or small enough for them to eat. They kill their prey with a venomous bite, so they're using those fangs, letting that animal get close to them, and then injecting venom into them. Then when the prey dies, they're going to ingest them head first. The main reason for that is to make sure that no little mouse arm or anything gets kind of stuck in their digestive tract. And then they'll move to a safe location in order to digest their prey. And they need a warmer location in order to digest their prey. If it's not warm, they'll actually regurgitate that prey item and will have gone without a meal, which is not ideal for them. During the wintertime, we don't see a lot of snakes or reptiles or anything, right? And they go into brumation, which is basically like hibernation. They'll hang out in a den. There can be hundreds of snakes there. And they'll also share those spaces with turtles, small mammals, other species of snakes, all kind of hanging out in that one little den, waiting for winter to be over. And they'll actually return to that same den every single year. So they'll use their smell-o-vision to kind of find where their den is, and they'll keep going back to that same den. So before we go any further, I want to kind of go over the difference between venomous and poisonous. These two words are interchanged pretty regularly, but there are some really key differences that make them different from one another. So the first difference is venomous means something is injected, whether it be by stingers, by fangs, it is physically injected into whatever it may be, whether it be a prey item or something trying to get a hold of them. So snakes, like our rattlesnakes, they are venomous because they are injecting venom into their prey item. Poisonous, on the other hand, means that it's absorbed. So an animal can be touched or eaten. Poison frogs, if you just touch them, you're going to absorb that poison into your skin. Same with poison ivy. So it's just absorbed, not injected. So there are different types of venom, and all venom really is highly modified saliva that's made up of protein and enzymes. And antivenom treats very specific types of venom. So a hemotoxin destroys red blood cells, causes bleeding, prevents clotting, and causes swelling near the bite, and can be super, super painful. That's what most of our snakes have. Then there is a neurotoxin, which disrupts the nervous system, breathing, speaking, coordination. It's not as painful, but it's shutting down that nervous system. And then the Mojave toxin is a mixture of both. Antivenom is pretty interesting, the way that they make it. So antivenom is made by milking a snake, so getting the venom out of the snake, and then they inject it into a horse, which creates antibodies, and they remove blood from the horse and separate out the antibodies, and then there's your antivenom. Pretty interesting way of doing it. So antivenom is very expensive to make, and the type of antivenom you get is going to be dependent on the type of snake bite, should you ever be unfortunate enough to get bit by a snake. So you really need to know the type of snake that bit you in order to make sure that you get the correct antivenom. So in Southern Nevada, there is more of a diversity of different rattlesnakes than we have up in Northern Nevada. There is the Mojave green, so you can see it kind of has that olivey tint to it. These are often mistaken for diamondbacks because of the kind of diamond pattern on their back. They are one of the most venomous snakes in North America and have that Mojave toxin, so the mixture of the neurotoxin and the hemotoxin. They don't have to be green, but that's kind of how they get their name. And they can be more aggressive than other species of rattlesnakes. Our Southern Nevada office has an example of one, and he's pretty feisty. Southern Nevada also has the sidewinder. So they have those little horned eyes, if you can see right over here. And they're known for the way that they move. So they have this sideways movement that they're doing. Go on YouTube, there's lots of really cool videos of the sidewinder making its way down a mountain. And they have the hemotoxin, so the one that's gonna not allow your blood to clot and swell up. Then there's the diamondback. You can kind of see how it looks pretty similar to the Mojave green with those kind of diamond patterns on its back. But the Western diamondback has the black and white tipped tail and then their rattle. Western diamondbacks can go after larger prey like rabbits, and their venom is also a hemotoxin. The speckled rattlesnake, which I think is one of the most beautiful rattlesnakes, has the Mojave toxin, and they have a lot of different variation in pattern. They're super great at camouflage. If you can see right here, this speckled rattlesnake, if I were just walking, would not be a good thing. I would probably step on it, unfortunately. They prefer a rocky habitat. And then there's also the Panamint, which has a hemotoxin venom, and they are a subspecies of the speckled. In Northern Nevada and a little bit of Southern Nevada, there is the Great Basin rattlesnake. It's also known as the Western rattlesnake, and it's the only venomous species in the northern part of the state. That's why I'm super happy I live in Northern Nevada. Don't have to worry about the others, just this guy right here. And they're found in a variety of habitats. They've actually been found up to, I believe it was 9,000 feet up in California in the mountains. So they get pretty high in elevation. And they can be found on rocky outcrops, in sagebrush, all different places. I've found them when I was walking right by the river in a little riparian zone where there was lots of trees, lots of water. They were hanging out there. So they can be found lots of different places. But there is an imposter, and that imposter is the gopher snake, also known as the bull snake. And they look very, very similar to rattlesnakes, but they are non-venomous. So they don't get their food by injecting the prey item with venom. Instead, they are constrictors. So they're gonna grab onto that prey item, squeeze, 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 and then consume. They're really cool because they do this thing called biomimicry. So a lot of things will eat a small snake, right? They try and eliminate that threat by acting like a rattlesnake. So they will flatten out their head to look like a triangle to mimic those venom glands. And then if they're near some brush, they'll quickly move their tail in a brush to imitate a rattle, which can send some predators running for the hills trying to find a different meal because they don't want to mess with a rattlesnake. Gopher snakes are anywhere from 3 to 8 feet long. And again, just like our Great Basin rattlesnake, they're going to live in a variety of habitats from forests to deserts to prairies, riparian zones right by waterways, and in the middle of the desert. They're kind of everywhere. And they can be found in neighborhoods pretty regularly as well. Gopher snakes are diurnal, so they're going to be most active during the day. And unlike the rattlesnake, they are going to lay eggs, and they can have anywhere from 2 to 24 young, and they can lay 2 clutches per season. So one rattlesnake could have 48 young in one season. But just like the rattlesnake, lots of things will eat a baby gopher snake, so their survival rate is not super high. The gopher snake eats small mammals like mice and rats and, surprise, surprise, gophers. They'll also eat bird eggs, and lizards. But a lot of things will also eat them, like foxes, red-tailed hawks, coyotes, and king snakes. So here are a few quick little ways to figure out whether or not you're looking at a gopher snake or a rattlesnake. The first one is the rattle. If you look at the end of the snake, if there is those chunky little keratin buttons, that's going to be a rattlesnake, whereas the gopher snake has that long, skinny, pointed tail. However, with rattlesnakes, because they're made out of keratin, they break off really easily. So sometimes you can't always figure out if it is a rattlesnake just based off of that rattle, because they might not have one, for instance. Another big distinction between the two is our rattlesnakes are some chunky boys. They've got that nice thick body, whereas a gopher snake has a very slender body, and it's typically pretty shiny, whereas the rattlesnake has a duller scales on them. And then there's the head. So the rattlesnake has that big, thick, triangular head, whereas the gopher snake has the long, slender head, unless they're trying to mimic a rattlesnake. I actually took some kids on a walk one day, and they were like, hey, there's a snake that I completely stepped over and didn't notice. And it ended up being a gopher snake, but its head was so flattened out, kind of like this rattlesnake, that it took me a second to figure out whether it was a rattlesnake or a gopher snake. So here's a really good example. You can see where those venom glands kind of lie in the rattlesnake's head, whereas the gopher snake has that long, skinny, slender head. Now, if you're close enough, which I do not suggest getting this close to any snake, there are a couple other ways you can figure out whether it's a rattlesnake or a gopher snake. Gopher snakes have round pupils and no heat-sensing pit between their nostril and their eye, whereas the rattlesnake does have that heat-sensing pit and has those vertically shaped eyes. So snakes really don't want to bite. That is going to be kind of their last resort. They have kind of a graded response when it comes to protecting themselves. Why wouldn't they want to bite a full adult? Well, they're really not going to get anything out of biting a human other than being able to flee and live another day. They're not going to be able to eat you or get anything out of that. And venom is really energetically expensive, and they really don't want to waste it. They would much rather use their venom on a food source than a human or a dog or something that they're really not going to get anything out of. So their first response is always going to be to hide and flee. They have really great camouflage. So if they can find a place to hide and get away from humans or whatever they're feeling threatened from, that's what they're going to want to do. Just like most other animals, coming into conflict with a top predator is not what they want to do. The second thing that they'll do is rattle to warn you to stay away. There is a caveat with this. Humans have actually been selecting for rattlesnakes that don't rattle before they strike. Why is that, you might ask? Well, whenever a rattlesnake rattles at a human, what's usually the first response people have? It's probably to kill the rattlesnake, right? So the ones that rattle get killed and their genetics kind of get pushed off to the sides, and the ones that survive are the ones that don't rattle. So when they reproduce, they're selecting for those traits of rattlesnakes that don't rattle. Super fun stuff. Then finally, after they do rattle, hopefully, the third option is going to be to strike, and that's really a last resort. They really don't want to do that. And one common myth is that they will strike twice their body length, but really it's only about a third of their body length. And hopefully you all saw this wonderfully camouflaged snake right there, being sneaky. When it comes to bite, only about half of them are about dry bites. So they don't actually inject any venom into the bite. And most of these bites happen on hands and arms, typically of people who are trying to handle the snake. And statistically, it's usually younger males, usually with alcohol involved. Let that lie there. So don't touch snake. You're substantially more likely to be bit by a dog. Domestic dogs bite about 1.5 million people every year, and that equates to about 30 deaths, whereas rattlesnakes only about 7,000 to 8,000 rattlesnake bites per year, and usually only 5 deaths. So that's less than 1% of them are actually fatal. Should you come into contact with a rattlesnake and be bitten, first couple things to not do is tourniquet the wound, cut the wound, suck out the venom, or put ice on it. You don't want to do any of those things because that can actually cause more damage than if you were to just leave it alone and go immediately to a doctor. Sucking out the venom really isn't going to do anything because those fangs are like little hypodermic needles, and once that venom is injected, it's in your bloodstream. There's really no sucking it out. So what you should do is avoid excess activity. Don't run for your car. You don't need to do that, but you want to immobilize the affected area and keep it below your heart. Again, remove any jewelry because that area is going to swell up likely, and go to a doctor immediately and take a picture of the offending snake. I know if you're bitten by a rattlesnake, your first thought is, hey, is not going to be, where is my camera phone? I really need to take a picture of the snake. But that's going to do the doctor a lot of good so he can figure out what type of snake it was and what type of antivenom to give you. So really just try and get to the doctor immediately, and try and get there within about 2 hours of getting bit. So as soon as you can, get there to the doctor. There are a lot of ways that you can kind of prevent conflicts with rattlesnakes. So the first one is to always be aware and alert. If there are lizards that are active in the area, snakes are also going to be active. I know I was taking a little walk over the weekend and there were plenty of little western fence lizards hanging out, getting some sun. So I know that the snakes are definitely going to be out as well. Always make sure to look and listen for snakes. Be cognizant of where you're walking, and know that they can be in the area. Making sure to stay away from vegetation and debris, places where they can hide and find shelter is really important. And stepping on top of rocks, not over them or beside them, because you don't know what could be either under that rock or what's on the other side. So you always want to step on top of them. And stay away from holes in the ground. This is super important for pet owners. I know my dog loves to shove her nose down any hole she can find, which is a mystery to me. But making sure that your pets are staying away from those holes and you are as well is going to be important in making sure that both of you stay safe. And don't touch snakes, dead or alive. They can still bite even if they are dead. And even if you know what kind of species of snake it is, it can still bite even if it is a gopher snake that constricts their food and doesn't have venom. They can still bite. And you can have complications that go along with that as well. So there are some things that you can do in your yard to help mitigate conflicts with snakes. So the first one is kind of a big project, but it really does a lot of good. And that is creating some exclusion fencing for the snakes. So you want to bury it 12 inches under the ground around your fence, basically so they can't burrow and get under your fence. Removing any excess shrubs and debris piles that might provide hiding places for snakes or rodents is going to be important, because anywhere you can find rodents, you can also find snakes, since snakes eat rodents. This is going to do a lot of good for your backyard, though, because it's not only going to decrease the habitat for snakes, but also other animals like coyotes and bobcats and other things that might eat some rodents or use those places as shelter. So removing any of those excess shrubs and debris really does a lot of good for your backyard and wildlife. And just keeping in mind that rattlesnakes are very beneficial for humans because they keep the rodent populations down. Rodents carry diseases like hantavirus and plague. So having those rattlesnakes help to keep those populations at a manageable level helps all of us out and keeps us safe. So we are going to play a fun little game. It is called Rattlesnake or Gopher Snake. So I'm going to show a picture of a snake, and then in your mind, just try and think and figure out if it is a rattlesnake or a gopher snake. So I'll give about 5 seconds and then I'll show you the answer. This one right here is our friendly gopher snake. You can see that he has the circular pupils and his tail is going down to a point over here, and he also has a pretty slender body. This one right here is a rattlesnake. So you can see it has a very triangular shaped head. Kind of down here you can see a little bit of the rattle, and it has a thick body, as well as the Jacobson organ, or the pit. This one again is going to be a rattlesnake. You can see the very defined triangular shaped head right there. So this one is another gopher snake. You can see that its body is pretty slender. It has those bright shiny little scales as well as the circular pupil. And we have a rattlesnake here. If you look really closely, you can see that vertical shaped eye pupil. And then it also has that triangular shaped head that our rattlesnakes are known for. And this one is a gopher snake. As you can see, it kind of has its head flattened out, trying to make it look like a rattlesnake, but it still has those circular pupils, kind of shiny scales, and it's going to be more skinny. So that's all I have. First, I want to say thank you all so much for staying home for Nevada. We really appreciate it. We're at home too, working away, but we appreciate everything that everyone is doing. If you have more questions, my contact information is down here. But Julie, are there any common questions that we should go over?
Yes, so there's one that just came in. Oh, there's two really good ones actually. So the first one is, I've heard that there are no poisonous snakes at higher altitudes on Mount Rose. You said that rattlers have been seen at 9,000 feet in California. I've never seen a rattler on Mount Rose like there are on Rattlesnake Mountain in Reno. What do you think?
So the study that I was referring to was on the California side, but I'm pretty sure that it was still in the same mountain range. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were rattlesnakes up there. It is colder, so up in higher elevations, obviously. So they might not be as active or as many of them, but I wouldn't be surprised. I would still be pretty careful.
Okay, and another question says, can you give information on snake avoidance training for dogs?
Yeah, so depending on where you live, there are snake avoidance training classes where they basically negatively reinforce the dog when they start to go up to a rattlesnake, and they have snakes and everything like that. You can email me if you're in the Western region, reach out to me and I can give you the information for the people who put that on. And I don't know if there's one in Southern Nevada, but I'm sure that there's some sort of training. But it's a great kind of training to do with your dog if you're out there all the time, hunting, fishing, hiking, whatever. It just basically teaches the dog when they hear a rattle to go the opposite way and get out of there.
Okay, we've got a couple more coming in.
Okay.
It says the conflict prevention slide. They were curious, is that a rattlesnake on the right? It just looks like granite. So if you want to go back to that slide and point that snake out.
Yep, it on the right, this one right here.
Yeah, cool. Very cool.
That is a snake. You can kind of see its eyeball right there.
Then what is the biggest and smallest rattlesnakes?
Oh, goodness. That is a great question. I do not have that fun fact off the top of my head. I think one of the bigger ones is the Western Diamondback.
Yeah, and I think in North America, I think the smallest is the pygmy rattlesnake in the East, I believe.
So not here.
Then we have two more.
Okay.
Oh, yes. So on the snake that looked like granite was a rattlesnake. She was clarifying that it was a rattlesnake.
Yes, it was a rattlesnake.
And then is it generally true that gopher snake's pattern shows a more rectangular pattern on top?
Yes. Do you know, Julie?
I don't know. That seems like that's probably one of those things that people use to help them identify. I would say I have ran into baby rattlesnakes that look really rectangular.
Yeah, I haven't heard of people identifying them that way. Mainly how skinny the body is, as well as how the tail comes to like that tapered point, I think is going to be a much better way of identifying it. Because rattlesnake patterns, for me, sometimes it's kind of hard to determine what they look like because there's so much variation in them.
Are any rattlesnakes endangered?
Not that I'm aware of, at least not with this species in Nevada.
Yeah, so, and this same person said that Eastern Diamondbacks are larger than Western, and I actually was about to say that I think that so larger and longer are two different things for snakes, though. So I think Easterns might be larger than Western Diamondbacks, but I'm not 100% sure. But so I do know that out east, in some states, timber rattlesnakes are endangered, and Mississauga rattlesnakes, but it's not national. They're not on the ESA. It's per state.
Gotcha. Yeah. But in Nevada, we don't have any that are endangered.
Oh, so someone was asking about that same slide that had the snake that looked like granite, and they want to know where the snake is on the other side.
On the other side? Oh gosh, I don't even think my eyesight is that good. I can try and blow it up really quick. Let's see. Where are you? To be honest, I did not put together the slideshow.
And then someone just has a comment about Get Rattled, the rattlesnake avoidance for dogs. And they hold a lot of classes in Northern Nevada, and they do a couple times per year in Southern Nevada.
Perfect. Thank
So
you.
that's Get Rattled.
So it looks like the snake is right there.
Oh,
Mistaken. Right?
yeah, that's the zoomed in version of that other photo that you used.
Exactly, yeah. The sneaky little snake right there.
So we have another question about where in Reno do we have the highest chance of encountering a rattler?
Honestly, I don't know if there's like a specific spot, but they're really all over the place. I've found them like in the hills near Keystone Canyon. I found them at McCarran Ranch next to the water. Lots of people encounter them off of like Hunter Creek. So they're really anywhere you're going out and hiking, you can find them.
Yeah, I actually agree. I've seen them like in the middle of the trail at
Yeah.
Rancho San Rafael Park, which is a very, very busy park.
Yeah. They're really everywhere. They're just usually going to try and go away from humans, so you don't tend to see them a ton, but they're there.
Okay, so I've got two more questions. How far do they travel from their dens?
Oh gosh, I think it's species specific. I had this fact in my brain at one point in time. I think for Great Basin rattlesnakes, it doesn't tend to be that far. They usually kind of hang out around there. Where was that study?
Yeah, I think that is really species specific.
So a mature male Great Basin rattlesnake may move up to 2.5 miles away from the den.
Cool, cool, cool. And then someone else was wanting more clarification. They were asking, can you go back to where you were saying how they make the rattle noise? So I think they're talking about how
The buttons move.
yeah, the snakes are reproducing to where they don't use their rattles before they strike.
Yeah, so basically what all that meant is when a rattlesnake rattles, they rattle and then usually they're killed, but the rattlesnakes that don't rattle, because they don't rattle, they're not really getting killed by people, so then they're able to reproduce, and when they reproduce genetically, we're artificially selecting for those snakes to no longer rattle. So then those snakes reproduce, have babies that don't rattle, those snakes are successful, and they pass those genes along to the next generation. So we're basically just creating a bunch of snakes that no longer rattle prior to striking.
Okay, so we've got some more questions coming in. This is a good one. It said, I heard locally that the kind of snake that bites you does not make a difference to doctors treating the patient for the bite because there's only one type of anti-venom in the area. Any truth to that?
So if you're in Northern Nevada, we only have the Great Basin rattlesnake. So yes, that would be the case. If you're up here, you get bit by a snake, it's going to be a Great Basin rattlesnake. So it doesn't really matter. Whereas in Southern Nevada, because they have a lot more different kinds of snakes, it is going to matter what kind of snake bites them, because it could be like a Mojave green, which has the Mojave toxin. It could be a sidewinder. It could be a Panamint, which has the hemotoxin. So for them, it's going to be a much bigger issue than up here in Reno.
So I actually have a correction to that. The treatment is for any crotalus snake, it's crofab.
Is it?
Yeah, it's all crofab. So they use lots of different venoms to create that antivenom, and that is really like, if crofab doesn't work for you, you are kind of not gonna do well. So if you get bit by something that is not in the crotalus or is not a pit viper, so something like a coral snake, crofab is not going to be effective at all. And there's a different treatment for that, but any crotalus is going to be treated by crofab.
Interesting.
Do the rattlesnakes have venom for life?
So they have to like regenerate it. So when they use it, they need to produce more of it. So I wouldn't say for life, but they keep making it. So yes, but no.
So yes, they always have it, but they can use it up.
Yeah.
They can make more.
Exactly. They have the ability to make more.
How do the buttons develop to make the rattle noise from juvenile to adult?
So when they shed, they gain another rattle on the end of it. And then that's when they start to move and then rattle.
Yeah. And then someone was asking what crofab is, and crofab is really just the name of the anti-venom medicine. So it's kind of like, we know what EpiPens are. It's like that. We know that an EpiPen is made of epinephrine. Crofab is made up of all these anti-venoms, but that's what it's called. It's called crofab.
So do they just like mix all the antibodies together for all the different?
So I don't want to get into it too much because it's very complicated, and I have not looked this up, but it has something to do with horses, like horse blood.
Yeah, so they will milk a rattlesnake and then they like inject the horse with the venom, and then
Yes.
that creates the antibodies, and then
Yes.
It's very weird.
Yeah. So it's something to do with horses, and I don't know if they must just pick like the worst venoms and put them in there. And there's something about Mojaves too, where it's like they have A and B, and like, can't you get bit by there's like some that just have A and some that just have B and some that have both?
Like of the same species, or just like,
you know what, I don't know. I shouldn't be sharing that. There's something, I mean, they're obviously special, but
yeah.
Someone asked, is it safer to wear long sleeves, long pants, and closed-toed shoes to minimize inadvertently getting bit?
Absolutely. I would suggest that for really any type of hiking that you're doing, not just for snakes, but there's a lot of brush in Nevada that is prickly and not very nice. But that definitely will help protect your legs and your feet for sure.
And we've got another question. What happens if you get bit by a snake with the same venom twice? So what if you get bit once, you get treated, and then you go out and you get bit again?
I don't think you get any immunity or anything like that because it's a venom.
No. It's bad. I think it's bad. I'm pretty sure that there's a really good chance that crofab will not, there's a potential that you'll need more dosage of it and it might not be effective for you.
But people do survive it. I met a dude who was bitten by rattlesnakes multiple times and still going.
And he lived to tell the tale.
And milk more snakes.
All right. Well, that is all of the questions that we've got.
Perfect. Sounds good. And if there are any other lingering ones, you can always shoot us over an email. So I have my email up right now if anyone needs to jot that down. Awesome. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us today. And is there another one tomorrow? Don't know off the top of my head. We'll continue.
Yes, it's me.
Oh, yes, duh. Julie is doing another presentation tomorrow all about the different apps that you can use at home to help you identify some of the critters in your backyard. So definitely join us for that.